Today is taken from Paul's letter to the Ephesians, chapter 4, beginning with the first verse. Therefore, as a prisoner for the Lord, I encourage you to live as people worthy of the call you received from God. Conduct yourselves with all humility, gentleness, and patience. Accept each other with love, and make an effort to preserve the unity of the Spirit with the peace that ties you together. You are one body and one Spirit, just as God also called you in one hope. There is one Lord, one faith, one baptism, and one God and Creator of all, who is over all, through all, and in all.
Thanks, Jim, for that reading. So we have a lot going on this Sunday, including our covenanting time, and we'll talk a little bit about that. I thought the way to launch into considering our involvement in the church would be to just meditate for a brief moment on this passage from Ephesians 4, 1-6. As I looked at this, I realized we could divide this passage into two important, I'm going to call them mysteries that are reflected here. The first one is the mystery, I would say, of calling. In the first three verses, Paul is making a plea. In fact, he is, in many translations, the word beg is used. I beg you to lead a life worthy of your calling. So when I think of this word of calling, I often anyway, go to the idea of some kind of special, noble status reserved for certain people and certain professions. It's really common, of course, to hear somebody say he heard God's call to go into ministry, or she felt called to become a doctor, these kind of things. But Paul, I think, is speaking to the whole congregation. He is saying to everyone, live into a life worthy of your call. Paul doesn't say if you are called, he assumes calling. And so do I. Everyone is called because whether through a loud voice or through a quiet voice within, regardless of education or economic status, regardless of creed or no creed, everyone, I believe, is called by virtue of the fact that you're born. Being born into the world is a calling, if you will. And because we are called, every person, every soul's agency, that is, the ability to affect change in the world, is important. In God's eyes, no one person's calling is better than another. Paul's favorite metaphor for describing the church, as Teresa pretty much gave the sermon this morning, it was a great talking about Paul's metaphor of the body. That's his favorite metaphor for speaking about the church. I thought, well, there are other metaphors. I look at the quilts over here, and I've heard the idea that the church is like a patchwork quilt where all the unique pieces are stitched together and make a whole, or the parable of stone soup, where the soup is for it to have nutrient and Flavor requires everyone's contribution. But whatever metaphor we use, the idea is the same. Within the body is a diversity of gifts and abilities, and all are important. Paul uses the human body as a metaphor in his letter to the church in Corinth. He goes into more detail, in fact, in that letter to the Corinthian church. Again, as Teresa reminded us, every part of the body has an important function, and if one of those functions is not there, then the body suffers. As I said, my belief personally is that we are all called, so if that is the case, the question may be, well, what are we called to? Paul says some are called to be prophets. In this same letter, a little further down, he says, some are called to be prophets, some apostles, some preachers, some evangelists, and some teachers. In another letter, he reminds his listeners, you may have all those gifts or more. But he says this, and I think we're all familiar with it. Corinthians 13, it's spoken of at many weddings and other events. If you don't infuse whatever gifts God has given you with love, then you are nothing but an empty gong and a clanging cymbal. So you might be a prophet. You might fancy yourself as that, or maybe you are. But if you do not have love, you are nothing. Paul lists some of the callings, as I said, preacher, evangelist, apostle, prophet. He also mentions teachers. What I'm about to say is teachers are excluded from this critique because teachers are saints. But they are the unsung heroes. But if they're not all great, but most of them are pretty great. But if someone today tells me they are any of those other things, I'm an apostle or I consider myself a prophet, my danger walls start to go up pretty fast. Too often such titles in our age of modern media are self-bestowed and non-accountable, and are titles adopted by grifters, narcissists, and sociopaths. Discernment is involved when one suggests that they are a prophet or an apostle. But I suspect that we'd all agree with my statement, we are all called. We are called in whatever profession, job, or activity we are doing. We are called to be kind. We are called to speak truth. We are called to work for justice. We are called to build up. We are called to encourage, to create, to nurture, and call out everything that is beautiful and right in this world. That's what this church is the vessel for. And what the church, it is what the church is. We say oftentimes the church is God's house, but it's only such to the degree that it holds and tries to express everything that is good and hope-filled in this world. I believe this is a space where we come together because we know that love is the most powerful force in the world, and in the end, love wins. When we commit ourselves to this church, we are saying in no uncertain terms that we reject what the powers of the world would have us settle for. We reject cynicism and indifference. We are tempted in those directions, but we reject those when we say we are a part of Christ's body. We reject the tired old norms of empire. We reject everything that undermines common human goodness. We want everyone who attends here, first-timers or old-timers, to know that this is a place that takes seriously Jesus' mandate to work for God's will being done on earth as in heaven. We want people to leave this church knowing that they matter, they belong, they have a calling to live within whatever context they happen to be living with, and at whatever stage of life they happen to be living through. We want them to know they matter. They have a calling. You have a calling. I have a calling. People walking outside have a calling. I know that I may, maybe I digress for a moment. As I was thinking of this sermon and I was considering this idea of call and asking myself, how did I get to where I got 67 years later after coming out of my mother's womb? And I started juxtaposing this idea of calling and fate. And I sometimes ask myself, as I said, how the heck did I get here? Do you ever wonder that in your moments of quiet? Of all the choices I have made in my life, how much of it was purely my will and how much of it was guided by a larger force? We can call it fate, we can call it God, we can call it destiny. But here we are. Here each one of us is. And all of us can say, look what has happened in all those years. Look what has been done. Look at what I've experienced, what I've learned, what I've received, and what I've given back. Some callings we don't understand. And they have led us here and continue to call out to us on the path, even though the path is uncertain. I didn't know we had this banner till it came up, and I appreciate that one very much. Give light to this uncertain path. The second half of the text that we have this morning is verses 4 to 6, and that speaks of the second mystery, the mystery of unity. Paul says, you are one body, one spirit, just as God has called you to one hope. There is one Lord, one faith, one baptism, and one God and creator of all, who is over all, through all, and in all. So the first mystery I've covered, mystery of called to love within whatever context that God has placed us in. It's not just your job, it's everything you do. And the second great mystery is this expression of unity and oneness. God is over all, in all, through all. Oneness and unity, as all religious mystics and masters of prayer tell us, is the true reality, the actual reality we are challenged to awaken to. So this body, I hope, somehow holds this idea from Scripture that God is in all, through all, within all. Every conflict we are witnessing in these chaotic times seems to exist because we fail to see as human beings this oneness reality of which we are a part, this interconnection that holds all things together and from whom the one source we all partake, which is God. Not everyone uses that word, and that's fine. But that is the reality that we live in, we just don't perceive so well. We fail to see this. We are blind. We are asleep. We are caught up in our fear and our greed and our ignorance. Furthermore, we live under soul-grinding systems of economic materialism where the poor and the marginalized are just sometimes working to survive. What kind of oneness accepts this bipolar world of its own making? What kind of faith would celebrate that? That's not a faith that I want to be a part of. That's the faith, that is the anti-faith that we deal with in our world. And this house of God and the people therein, which is the spirit of the place, the spirit we bring to this place, is where we say we don't accept our fate to be a cruel people, a divided people, an angry people, a fearful people. That is not the world that God calls us to. God calls us, everyone, to affirm and lift up this idea of calling and this idea of oneness in the world. So, we have these two mysteries, and this God that is over all, through all, and in all. And may that guide us. I want to take a minute and just remind us of what this covenant is and say a few words. I did try to explain in our e-bulletin that one of the operative words is intentionality. In every church this is our intentions for the coming year, to be involved in the church and to live up to those as best we can. It's not a lifetime commitment. In every church I've served in, there's been a question of what is membership? How do we keep it fresh? How do we provide an entry point for people who maybe have been in the church forever, or not been in the church forever, but have walked in the doors and they feel like second-class citizens, or like they walked into somebody's living room, or any of those things? Well, one way to do that is to have a chance for everyone, the long-termers and the short-termers, the new ones and the old ones, everyone, come in on the same plane and say, for this year, for this time, we are going to, our intentions are to live out these words as the body of Christ. So, I just want to defer to this a little bit. Coming together as a Christian faith community, known as Hyde Park Mennonite Fellowship, we commit ourselves as we are able to the following. And you notice there are 4 things. And they start with to this, to that. To enjoy. Enjoy. That's a good word. We come to church to find joy in fellowship and support and participation together in worship, prayer, service, and play. Those are 4 important operative words, I think, for the church. Worship, prayer, service, and play. And then, second, to serve. To serve one another and the world by sharing our talents, resources, time, and abilities, so that God's peace, justice, and healing might flow through us to the world. I don't think this is... What did he say? Hey, Zoom people, I'm sorry. You were probably frustrated there for a minute. The 4th one, to support, the work of the larger Anabaptist vision, which joyfully seeks to live out Jesus' teachings of salvation, peace, nonviolence, restoration, and care for the whole of God's created order. Again, it's important to, I think, identify ourselves within this tradition of Anabaptism, that form of Christianity that has a specific idea, particularly that Jesus is at the center of our faith, and the body of Christ is everyone, and the priesthood of all believers. again, we see this word joyfully. That's an important component of a faith community, it feels like. We should have a sense of joy, even in hard times. Some of these words, salvation, for instance, those are challenging words for some. What does that mean? Peace, how do we live that out? Nonviolence, we struggle with that. We are prone toward violence. Restoration, care for the whole of God's created order. And finally, to value attitudes. And these are important attitudes, I think. Hospitality, humor, again, another one that invokes embodied joy. Diversity, honesty, and openness so that we may give to others, and this is important, and to ourselves the same grace that God offers to us. For our authenticity of being able to extend grace to others, I think we have to say, well, would I treat myself with the same kind of grace that I would hope others would treat me, or that I believe God would treat me? And oftentimes the answer is no. I'm not giving God's grace to myself as much as I might want to offer it to others. So I'm going to leave. I know our service is going to run a little longer, but is there any specific thoughts, brief thoughts on this covenant? Anything you want to say that? That's fine. Let's see. We don't have to talk. Like anything, it's not a creedal statement, really, as so much as, and we're not making grand statements about God and Jesus. It's more about who we are and what our intentions are as a group of people. So we're going to invite people who care to make this intention. And again, I want another important phrase here is, as we are able. It's like, yeah, to the best of our ability. That's an important clause there, I think. But our intentions are for this. It's about who we want to be as a people. So we are encouraged to sign around the mat before if you want to, while we take communion or before you take communion. If you don't want to sign, just pass by and receive communion if you wish to. So it's an individual choice. We have Sharpies here to sign or initial. But if you're one of those people that just like, you know what, why do I need to do that? I get that. So that's okay too. It's not you're in or you're out. It's again, it's an expression of your intentions. So that's what I will invite. Let's see, I brought do we have a song, or are we going to go right into, pardon? Okay, so let's go into communion again. So what we're going to do is we're going to invite people to come up this side. You're welcome to initial or sign this if you want to be a part of the covenant for this year. Nobody's taking tabs on whether you showed up at church the following Sunday because, I want to reassure people. It's about your personal intentions, okay? If you want to sign and then receive the communion and then go around on this other side. The song is that we'll be playing is Here I Am. 545 in the hymnal, and Christine will just be accompanying us through that and continuing it on till everyone has been served.